Hey everyone, it's your girl Zero G's back on the belt with a heavy review for Welcome Villain's latest drop called Beaten to Death. Najir slid this one in my DMs not too long ago, and I figured that I would give it a shot since I loved the production company's last release called Balum. It was actually one of my favorite movies of this year. But this joint right here, we're just gonna have to get into it. Beaten to Death is written and directed by Australian native Sam Curtin and tells the story of basically a man on the run, battered, beaten, blinded, bloodied, bruised, you name it, from the harsh elements and an even harsher group of violence junkies. This is not a film for everyone. It's time for the extreme cinema fam to eat now, okay? I'm not going to be holding back my honesty on this one, but let's start with the things that I did like. The performance of the antagonist in this film was so harsh in the best way. Great casting all around. I would not want to run into these guys in any setting, let alone rural Australia. Just hell no. Also, shout out to the production value, though. The budget was definitely split in places where it deserved to be split. Great acting, good cinematography. This whole shebang deserves a better script than we got in the end, unfortunately. But on the bright side, the geek in me let out a crazy squeal when I saw that beautiful reference to Lucio Fulci's Zombie of 1979. If you're out there and you've seen the film, you're a fan of the film, you're probably going to know it when you see it. There may or may not be an eyeball involved. There's also a Shining reference in there that's been done hundreds of times before, but for the fans, I'm sure you'll be happy to catch both. There might even be more that I missed. You should let me know in the comments if you find anything else. Now, let the criticism begin. I personally strongly dislike the way that this film was color graded. The more extreme scenes are toned all the way down in a way that washes away almost all of the color. And I originally thought that this was supposed to indicate a flashback. You know, that's common when we go back in time and the film turns to black and white or something close to that. But later in my viewing, I came to the conclusion that it's probably to make the insane amounts of blood and flesh pop in the more violent torture scenes. I don't know how successfully that will read with most audiences, but for me, I was just kind of bothered because everyone's skin looked gray and nothing really looked interesting. Personally, I like when blood is like bright red like they did back in the 80s, but I'm just gonna have to settle for brown, and I'm sure you will have to settle as well. Also, speaking of the 80s, this might be the only instance where I've seen hella violence with very limited gore since the 80s, but not in the best way. There's not much context to add to the situation either, which is something that it does separately from how we used to do it in the 80s. So I'm just gonna call this diet exploitation cinema. If anything, I will say it's an okay starting film for horror fans who want to explore their tolerance in the world of extreme horror, but I would also say that there are better options out there than this one. But speaking of context, we already have some... Sorry, Najir. I'm starting that thought over. Thank you. Speaking of context, though, we have some seriously questionable editing choices over here, my guy. It's giving fuck the 3-arc system. We really only get 2 arcs. I think that's generous. I would actually call it 1.5 arcs. But the arc that's supposed to provide context, to set up the story, set up the scenes, set up the characters, all that information that's supposed to be in the exposition of a film, we don't get until somewhere between acts 2 and 3. So unfortunately, it's really difficult for the viewer to give a damn about the character we're supposed to be wincing in pain for, because this is that kind of movie. Also, mild spoiler alert, when that context does come to you, you probably still won't care too much. Anyway, Beaten to Death is now in its limited theater run, but if I may suggest, let me suggest waiting until later this month. Fuck, I'm gonna try that again. Anyway, Beaten to Death is now in its limited theater run starting back in September 1st. But if you will take my advice, let me suggest waiting until later this month to test your violence tolerance at home. When it drops in VOD, it will be available to buy and rent later this month. I have been Zero Gravity, and I have also been beaten to death by this film. Thanks for watching.